freaking first cut. Golly. Welcome to the First Cut Podcast. I'm Rick Gehman, and this is your recap pod for this week's WGC Dell Technologies match play. And joining me to break it all down, Greg DuCharme is here. What's up, Greg?
What's going on, guys? Excited to be here. I'm hoping to keep the energy up tonight.
We certainly will. Mark Immelman is here. Mark, good to see you.
How's it, boys? Back home. It's nice to be home. And let me tell you, the pollen is out in full force in Georgia. If you're thinking down the track about 10 days, I've got the stuff everywhere in my nostrils and the like. But otherwise, we're good.
Start popping those allergy pills every morning. That's what you got to do. Kyle Porter, KP, what up?
How do you decide like what order to go to people? Is it random? Is it whoever's looking at them
unless
at the
I'm
camera?
unless I'm scheming something, then I usually kind of go random. You usually come last because you're KP. I get to put the exclamation point on it. You usually have a little quip that starts us off, so I usually go to you last.
I think it's also because I'm always looking at my phone. So you're
like,
well,
you're never paying attention.
He's not paying attention.
Greg looks me dead in the eyes the entire podcast, so I know I can go there first, and we're not gonna have any issues.
Wow, that makes I always feel like I'm looking off in the distance. So my self-consciousness is, am I looking at the camera enough? So I guess I am. But so thanks for that, Rick.
Yeah, of course. Also, Coach is not with us. But he did win the bracket challenge out of us, gentlemen. So we've done everyone a favor, not had him on tonight, because I think we would be hearing a lot about it if we had him here this evening.
I think win is a pretty relative, it's a pretty liberal term.
It was last man standing, basically.
Yeah, his bracket was so he got like three. Okay, so he had Scheffler. He had Scheffler losing in the quarterfinals. That was essentially good enough considering what the rest of our brackets looked like. It was pretty ugly stuff. It is still madness time in the sports world with the NCAA tournament as crazy as ever, but diehard sports fans like you know you want to stay in the know with all sports, and that's where CBS Sports HQ is your streaming answer. Just think about what is on tap this week alone. NFL draft and offseason coverage, MLB opening day, Thursday. Think about that. Bellator 255, that's Friday. Golf picks and highlights on and off the course. You get unmatched breaking news coverage. We could go on, but you get it. Sports never sleeps, and neither does CBS Sports HQ. It's available on your computer, your phone, via the CBS Sports app, and your connected TV. I leave it on all day long, and if you live and breathe sports, I'd encourage you to as well. Gentlemen, after 7 matches over 5 days, it is Billy Horschel hoisting a World Golf Championships trophy, the 6th PGA Tour victory of his career. Greg, we'll start with you. How would you describe Billy Horschel's performance this week?
Man, well, today was kind of a separate thing.
Nice caveat.
I was wondering how nice he was going to
be. This always happens. Sunday is a tough day. It's the 7th round that they've played in 5 days. And when you add when you have the toughest conditions on the 7th round, it's just you're set up for a long match. So this wasn't exactly exciting. It wasn't exactly the finish that we got all through the week. Like this week, especially during group play, was so exciting. It felt like every match was coming down to the 17th and 18th holes, and those are just, and 16, 17, 18 is perfect, a perfect way to finish the match play. There are birdies and eagles and bogeys and others. So it was great. As for Billy himself, he did exactly what he had to do, and I felt like he was always in control of his matches. There were a couple where he was down early, like he was. Aside from the loss to JT Poston, there were a couple where he was down. But what I really liked is the match against Colin Morikawa, where he needed a win in order to advance through the group stage, and he trailed only after the 12th hole. He trailed 1 down. He was leading for the remainder of that match. And then in his match against Kevin Streelman, his first match, he led the entire time and was able to close that out on 17. So he was able to get control of many of the matches early and do exactly what he had to do to win. We saw more of that against Scottie Scheffler, who didn't really pressure him, but he basically just played great box out golf where he did exactly what you had to do and stay ahead of. So I was impressed.
Yeah, we'll talk about that Scottie Scheffler match here in a second, Mark. But let's mine into the path here for Billy Horschel. So he defeats Max Homa 1-up in round 1. He loses to JT Poston, kind of got whooped a little bit 4-2. Defeats Colin Morikawa 3-2 to get out of Group 5. And then the run is 3-1 over Kevin Streelman. He defeats Tommy Fleetwood in extra holes, and then he gets through Victor Perez on Sunday morning before taking down Scottie Scheffler here in the finals. That's a pretty impressive route if you have to go through 7 matches of match play.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think enough credit is paid to the folks he went through. I mean, Morikawa in that group, the top seed, was always going to be a tough out, and Billy handled him quite well. And then when you get into knockout stages, anything is possible. You know, Greg touched on that a little bit. And you draw Tommy Fleetwood, who I didn't think was playing very well earlier in the week, but it seemed like he was getting stronger in every match. The ball striking got a little tighter. He started to make a few more putts, and so Fleetwood looked like he was certainly going to be a tough out, but Billy handled the thing. And the thing that stood out to me about his performance is twofold. First off, good on him, because just a few weeks ago down there in Bradenton, he was on the receiving end of Morikawa and finished runner-up down there in the World Golf Championships event. So all of a sudden, just a few weeks hence, now he wins. So how's that record? He's gone second first and has actually been playing pretty solidly the last little stretch here in Florida. He plays well in the Valero Texas Open, so maybe he can kick this thing on. So there's that. And then I just want to recognize his physical shape, you know, because it's grueling stuff. And I can tell you that golf course is a tough walk. It's up and down. The front side is all elevated and sort of winds between the Austin Hills, and then the back nine, you go down the hill, and you play until the final couple holes are uphill. I mean, 16's like Thrombosis Hill. You walk uphill a long way. And then there's a big walk to get to 17, tee up a sharp hill. And he looked fresh coming down the stretch in every one of those matches. Where as I was watching, I saw a lot of guys kind of falter a little bit late in the round, where Billy was in good shape. And so all the work he does in the gym, the discipline he shows in preparation was well rewarded. So, you know, it was an earned victory. No one fell over in front of him, that's for certain.
It was earned, as Greg put it. He did exactly what he needed to. KP, when you look at the finals against Scottie Scheffler, I look at scorecards as I glance at this. I believe the last birdie we got from either guy was the 5th hole. Am I reading that correctly? So Billy Horschel did what he needed to, but there certainly weren't many fireworks on Sunday at Austin Country Club.
Yeah, really all day. I mean, and I think what's interesting about Horschel, it's very, and this is both the best and worst thing about match play is how situational it is. He plays the first 2 days in even par. So that was Homa and Poston. I think he was 2 under against Homa, 2 over against Poston. He plays the last 2 matches in even par. So he was he was 1 over against Scheffler and 1 under against Victor Perez. And you know, the middle 3 he played pretty good golf, right? But the first 2 and the last 2, it's like, now granted, I think Sunday was tough. So I think if you look at, we have very incomplete strokes gained stuff for the last day because there's only, 4 guys. But it's a little unfair to say even par on the last day it wasn't bad, but it wasn't good. I mean, he said it in his interview. He was like, I didn't play very well today. And it's like, well, here's a check for $1.8 million, which is like a great thing about match play, but it's also kind of an infuriating thing if you're Patrick Cantlay. You're like, wait a second, I played 13 under the first 3 days, and this guy won. And so I don't know. It's really interesting. The final was brutal, and I think for somebody like Horschel, I think it makes sense that somebody like him would win, because when it becomes a war of attrition, half the battle is how much energy do you have, and he has twice as much energy as everybody else out there. I think if this thing was 6 more rounds, he'd win by a lot more, just because that skill, I guess if you want to call it that, becomes disproportionately valuable late in a match play event like this. So I thought that was what kind of. I mean, we talked about guys it wouldn't be fun to play against. It would not be fun to play against Billy Horschel. He's always talking to you. He's always talking, and he's just relentless. I mean, he just doesn't let up, whether it's with his golf or with his talking or whatever.
That is a good call, because I just want to toss this out there to you, Rick. I mean, since Wednesday when the tournament kicked off, he's played 7 rounds of golf. In fact, the final 4 guys played 7 rounds of golf in 4 days. That is tough sledding, man. I don't care who you are. And so, to the victor go the spoils. He's earned the right to be the freshest.
I'm exhausted just watching Billy Horschel, watching him out there, listening to him, all that stuff, Greg. And while he would be certainly, I think, annoying and difficult to play against if I had to, he's also very generous out there. I don't know if you've paid attention all week long. He gave putts that I was routinely like, Billy, are you like campaigning for something right now? Like, you are everybody's best friend. He did it all week long, and I guess not even to his own detriment, because here he is on Sunday as our champion.
There is a little bit of gamesmanship to it. My original thought is, like, early in matches, I like to give people putts personally, and it works very well. This is PGA Tour level. But when somebody's thinking, and when you put the question into somebody's mind, am I going to have to hit that putt? Along with that comes doubt. And it takes a very strong mind to say, okay, I'm ready to hit that putt. I'm ready to make it. But if you're constantly giving putts, it can make your opponent relax a little bit. It can. Doesn't always. And then at one point when they really don't want to hit a putt, you make them hit it, and you can kind of encourage them to miss. Look, is that a huge deal? No. But the one that really surprised me was today at number 2, giving a 35-footer, right? I mean, that's different than giving a 4-footer. Giving a 3-footer on number 2, it's a lot different. There's gamesmanship in, hey, I'm not going to let him hit that 3-footer because I want him to think about it. I want to put down. That's a potential strategy. But given a 35-footer, I don't understand. I don't understand. Maybe there's nothing to gain from it. So hey, he won, but that was a very interesting play right there.
Do you think for 1 minute he might have lost count? Because I was with you, really.
Yeah, seriously, he might have. He might have thought he was putting for 6 and he had to 3. Yeah, it's a good point, Mark. That would make more sense than anything I've thought of.
The oldest trick in the book is to give a guy a putt early, and then you give him 1 or 2, and all of a sudden, late in the round, you're like, no, you got a putt, and you catch him unawares. So I can see him doing that a bunch. But I looked at that, and I'm like, he must have lost count, because those greens are difficult, and the speed was constantly changing to me. I mean, the greens were soft and very slow for what they normally like early in the week. And then as they began to firm up, you could see them picking up speed. So it was a severe mental misstep, and I'm wondering if he miscounted. I really am.
Was there a birdie putt made in the finals?
Oh, because that one was conceded. That was technically an eagle putt right on 2, and on 5, which was the last birdie putt that we had,
Horschel chipped in.
Yep.
So
those are the only 2 birdies.
Say no, right? There wasn't a birdie putt made in the finals.
They should roll this up. Whoever wins in 2022 should get 2 trophies. Like, just roll it over. Just give them both second. You can't make one. I mean, I get that it's windy, but like,
I'm going to be the crotchety old guy now, right? Because like in round 1, Brian Harman goes off and makes 8 birdies and loses. Then Bubba makes 4 birdies and loses to Harman yesterday, whenever it was. And Harman makes 8 in a row. It's about making 1 less than whatever your other guy shoots. If he makes 9, if you make 8, you win the hole. That's just what match play is.
Well, just make 1. Like, it shouldn't be a finals unless one person makes 1 birdie. They should just throw the whole thing out. Give the trophy to Sergio for his hole-in-1.
I understand what you're saying, Kyle, because you got to somebody should have made a birdie. Like, Scottie Scheffler had plenty of birdie opportunities coming down the stretch. Horschel, you could argue at 12 or at 16. Like, he should not be making 6 on 12 after laying. There's no way. But but to Mark's point, you have the opportunity when you're up, when you're leading, like Billy Horschel was, to play. I call it box out, right? Yeah, it's like a game of horse. You get in horse, if you start with the ball, you don't start at the half court line. because now you're going to give the ball away. But if you start with a couple of layups, a couple of shots you really like, some mid-range, you control the game, maybe you catch them off a mistake, but you're shooting first. You're always in control. And early on, what I thought was the tipping point of the match was on 7 when Scottie hit that chip shot way by and makes bogey. All of a sudden, he loses that momentum that he had all weekend. Once he got out of group stage, he didn't trail in a match until number 7 there. And that was a real turning point because now all of a sudden he gave the ball back to Horschel, and now Horschel just boxed him out.
Greg, how often do you play horse? You have the strategy down pat here.
Yeah, well, I
bet Greg's good at horse.
I've retired. Yeah, I control the game.
I bet he's pretty good.
He's making
haven't played in a long
analogies to boxing out and also to horse in this podcast alone. I think Greg is getting
March
shots
Madness
up
time.
in his pastime. Yeah.
Well, I grew up playing Nerf basketball. I almost took the second
Nerf
floor of our
basketball.
house. Yeah, the second floor of my childhood home is probably fallen through now. I played it up until I was a junior in high school. Solo Nerf basketball.
Nerf or JV?
Nerf. I never played organized basketball.
I hate to go further on this, but we're talking about Nerf basketball, right? Like a little hoop and a little ball. And
I had this Nerf baskall hoop outside my bedroom, up on the mantle.
I love this.
And I would play for hours. I mean, literally, when I was in middle school, especially, I would play I'd be missing homework assignments because I'm playing, Nerf basketball by myself upstairs.
You were talking about basketball as if you were at least a role player on on varsity.
Well,
this is like somebody saying, "Hey, I played professional golf for a long time," and it's like, "Oh, what tour?" Oh, well, I was on the Hooters. I was missing cuts on the Hooters tour, and you're like, "Oh, well, I don't know."
Is that relevant? Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but the good news is here I'm talking about horse. So this is like a Hooters tour player giving advice on mini putt, right?
Hey, what's that tour that the club pro guy used to play on? The Mexican mini
tour.
The only thing I can think better than being a role player on varsity is being the star of Nerf basketball, which is exactly what Greg DuCharme was. Let's talk about Scottie Scheffler. Could have become the second WGC winner this year, Mark, under the age of 25. He was looking for the first career PGA Tour victory. For it to come in a WGC would have been quite interesting, but he comes up a bit short, looked a bit flat as the day went on, just couldn't get much going on Sunday, but we'll get to his path in a second. His path to this final was unbelievable.
Incredible. It really was. And you know what? I'm probably the wrong guy to ask to comment on this because I was just looking through myself and a couple of colleagues from PGA Tour Live had this little pool where we each put a sum of money in and then we picked matches every day. And the guy with the best record, of course, won the money. And in hindsight, as I look back now, I called less than a third of the matches correctly. So I had no idea what was going on this week. And I just couldn't figure out. I couldn't figure out what the recipe to success was around there. And match play is difficult over 18 holes, we all know, because you one guy and you get on the wrong side, all of a sudden that person accelerates. But the one thing that really impressed me by what Scottie did was he just seemed so calm all of the time. He never looked too flustered. All the matches against all these stars. I mean, that match against Poulter was our feature group match early Saturday morning. And you're expecting Poulter to go bananas. And on the first hole, Poulter's way over the back of the green, DOA, and pitches it up there to about 15 feet, which was fantastic, and drills that for a tie. And I'm like, here we go, Poulter at full force. And Scheffler just cruised. He just kept him at bay. And then Poulter drills this 40-footer on 11. Scottie doesn't flinch, chips in on top of him. Then Poulter makes this bomb on 13. And Scottie holds a downhill 6-footer to tie the hole. And so he just stayed so calm the whole time. And I've always been impressed at him. You don't stumble into the Rookie of the Year award. But he went up in my estimations because playing in front of your home crowd, that is hard. I don't care what you say because they can carry you along, but there's extra pressure that's involved. So there's that. It's a difficult golf course. Yes, he knows it. But you still have to hit the shots. You still have to make the putts. And the mindset he showed throughout these 7 matches, I was highly impressed. And so I just hope for his sake he takes this and he builds on this thing to put together a big year and a hopefully bigger career.
Yeah. Here's the path that Scottie Scheffler went through, KP. He defeats Jason Day in round 1, 2 up. He ties Andy Sullivan. He goes on to tie Xander Schauffele, in which he then has to defeat Xander Schauffele in a playoff. Then he gets into the single elimination round, beats up on Ian Poulter 5-4, defeats John Rahm 3-1, beats Matt Kuchar, who became the second most winningest player all time at this event, and then falls just short. I mean, this was a gauntlet for him to get even into the finals.
Yeah, the Saturday stuff was crazy because he was 15 under through, what is that, 31 holes against Poulter and Rahm, against, a percentage of the European Ryder Cup team. And yeah, he was awesome. The Scheffler, you want to see him win. Like you don't want it to be this thing where it's like, oh, it's 4 years in, man, Scheffler's really good. Why hasn't he won yet? And he's won on the Corn Ferry. So I think it's still a little bit unfair to kind of talk about that, but God, he just had so many opportunities in the afternoon against Horschel and just didn't. It was just, it felt like it was like time for him to do it, and he just didn't do it. So I thought that was a little bit disappointing. But I think if you're him, you have to look at the week as a whole as a positive. And we always talk about Ryder Cup stuff at this time of year, like with the match play, and I think he is. I mean, he's certainly on the fringes, but I think it would be he's going to have to do it like through his play at the majors over the next 5 months. But I think he's a really interesting guy for that team right now.
Yeah, let's just talk about Ryder Cup. That's on our outline. We'll get to it right now. So implications for Billy Horschel and Scottie Scheffler, Greg, because this is always the conversation we have, especially when you get match play, right? And it's like, oh wow, yeah, he goes out, he beats Poulter, he beats Rahm, he defeats Kuchar, who has won so many match play events in his, or not events, but matches in his life. But I still look at this USA team, Greg. Dustin Johnson, Bryson DeChambeau, Justin Thomas, Brooks Koepka, Colin Morikawa, Xander Schauffele, Patrick Reed, Tony, it's just so stacked. Where do these guys even fit in?
Right. Who do you pick? Who do you replace? And which one of these guys, if either, jumps Jordan Spieth? So, I mean, a couple of the things that come to the benefit of a player like Billy Horschel or Scottie Scheffler, and I'll include Jordan Spieth in that as well. The fact that we're not going to have Tiger Woods in the mix as an option for a cap. I think Steve Stricker, if Tiger were healthy, would have a hard time saying no to Tiger. So that eats up a spot, which is no longer there. So we don't have to worry about. The other is Brooks. Mm-hmm. How long is Brooks going to be injured for? And if this goes on for, Brooks has said he'll see what happens for Masters. I've also heard people say, Brad Faxon was saying it could be 6 to 8 months. Yeah, so all of a sudden, right, he's missing nearly the whole year, and he's not ready for Ryder Cup. So now all of a sudden that opens up another spot. And it's very interesting, to Kyle's point, who performs in the majors down the stretch here of these guys. They're going to have an opportunity to get in the mix. But I will say this. This event always brings a correlation to Ryder Cup, and we always see the success of Kevin Kisner, and we want to get Kisner. To me, the guys are Kisner, Billy Horschel, and Kevin Na are three guys that we always want to. There's a big group that wants them to be a captain's pick. They want to get them on the team because they're a little bit different style-wise than the Americans. And I'm just not sure that this event really paints a great picture. These guys play match play all the time in their own backyards. They grew up playing match play in college. You heard Scottie Scheffler say, I do have a lot of match play experience just because it's my first professional match. I play match play all the time, and I played it all the time in college. I'm experienced in match play. I think it kind of gets oversold with the correlation between this and the Ryder Cup.
I was just, but when you were asking about the captain's picks and stuff, I was going to mention Brooks Koepka. Because I'm not so sure he'll be available for the rest of the year. And if he's lightly run, if I was Captain Stricker, even though he's Brooks Koepka, I'm not so sure you would play him, especially on a bum knee, a knee where you've had surgery on. But you're always looking at folks, and we sort of prognosticate, but the best thing that the captain can always do, I think, is look at the folks who are playing well at the time. And a few years ago, there was a change made to the selection criteria where the team was moved to be announced after the Tour Championship, because it used to be well before then, and you were having some guy that won the Tour Championship or Xander finished runner-up was not even considered, or he couldn't make the team. So I'd start looking farther down the track. But hey, Steve Stricker did tweet that he was keeping eyeballs on Scheffler because look, the guy is a great player. We all know this. He's a super putter, which you have to be in match play, and he just looks so easily pairable. And you could play him with anybody because he just is so easygoing.
I do not envy Steve Stricker's job here, KP, in trying to decide, because he gets 6 of them, 6 captain's picks, because only 6 automatic qualifiers. This is going to be quite the task when it comes time to punch these in.
Yeah, it's kind of a fake 6 though, right? Because it's going to sort itself out to the point where it's like, okay, well these guys, you're not going to have somebody that's 8th in the points and not take them. Like it would just be weird. Like they're so conservative with the picks anyway. They take the safest option anyway, that they're not going to do that. But I think that, you look at the list and it's like, if Koepka and let's say Koepka's out, Harris English is 12th right now. I think everybody ahead of English is going to be in, which is DJ, JT, Bryson, Morikawa, Xander, Reed, Finau, Berger, Webb, Cantlay. I think those 10 are in probably. Berger's, we'll see how he plays at the majors, but I think more than likely those 10 are in. And then Spieth's going to be in unless he just falls off the map because he's Spieth and because Patrick Reed can't win a match without him. And then what do? Then you've got Scheffler, you've got Kisner, you've got Matthew Wolff could play great at the majors. He hasn't been playing well, but he played great at the majors last year. So Max Homa's been playing great. It's going to be a war. I mean, it's going to be the 13 through 18 guys are going to be, you could start another team with them. And it's going to be awesome. I'm excited to follow it, especially with how many points are available at the major championships over the next 5 months.
Kyle, what seed do you think Jordan Spieth has to reach in order to kind of be a lock? You think he's got to get top 12? Do you think if he ended at 21st like he is right now, you think he'd still get in?
Yeah, I do. Because he's so ingrained with that group, like that group that's done, they've been through all the wars together, the President's Cup stuff, the Ryder Cup stuff. I just think he's viewed, I mean, Phil said it like 6 years ago. He's like, this guy's the future of the American teams, and his play has fallen off, but I can't imagine them looking at this group and being like, you know what, we're going to go with Jason Kokrak over Jordan Spieth because he's ranked 13th and Spieth is ranked 21st. Like, that's not going to happen, right? So, he has to keep playing well, or at least somewhat well. But if he's anywhere in the ballpark, I think they'll take him.
The rest of the Final Four played in a consolation match, and it was Matt Kuchar coming out on top over Victor Perez Mark, which means Victor Perez falls just short of earning his special temporary status. And as I mentioned earlier, Matt Kuchar moves into second place all time with 33 wins at this event. And of course, the only man with more won, Tiger Woods. He's just like the default answer for what's the most ever, Mark. It's just Tiger. Just assume.
Yeah, well, look, you got to be impressed at Matt Kuchar. The guy came in here with not very much form at all. I think I heard his best finish had been like maybe somewhere in the mid-30s in one of the events he had played. But he just started cruising. And, man, let me tell you what, he dropped the hammer on Justin Thomas on Wednesday morning. I mean, that was he just made putts from all over Austin, Texas on JT and one really at a counter. And I looked at this, I'm like, well, it's an aberration. It's one of those sorts of things. But he just kept on backing it up. And he just was cruising and was unbeaten until the semifinal. And I looked at this and it sort of made me smile deep down because it's match play. It's what it represents. But I also love it when the medium range hitter who sort of cobbles together rounds and plays smart and is academic about what he does and sort of does his own way to the game. And I love it when folks like that have success. And, Kuch's proven now because now he's probably got a little confidence going on about him. And there's a few venues around the place that he can go and compete. So, maybe this is another run where he starts to put himself in the money. He plays places, Dye Golf Course as well. And we've got RBC Heritage in front. And we've got places where he's played well. So hopefully this is, the change. He made a putter change this week, which looked like it worked great. He found a little form with a golf swing. And so I was just amped that, medium range hitter could compete and contend, and he knocked off some pretty big hitters en route to that semifinal.
We certainly did. It's amazing what these guys can summon, even if they're not in great form. On the opposite side, Victor Perez, Greg, has been in pretty great form. He entered this week as the 33rd ranked player in the world. We don't often see him over here on the PGA Tour, but when he comes over, he seems to play well. He had a top 25 at the PGA Championship. He had a top 10 at the Players Championship just a couple of weeks ago. Now this, a Final Four at the Match Play. Is it time we start taking Victor Perez a lot more seriously?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I'm curious to see how often he starts to play over here. He has said that one of his goals is to play his way onto the PGA Tour. He nearly did that today. Only Matt Kuchar stood in his way. So I'm curious to see what happens in that regard. What sticks out to me about Victor Perez is what he did at the Players Championship. He shot 73-71 to make the cut on the number. But the 71st shot was a chip in. He holed out to make the cut on the number and then ends up shooting 69, 67 over the weekend to finish inside the top 10. And a little moment like that, one turning point moment when the margins are so fine, which is what we see in the match play. You see this, there are so many upsets in match play because the margin between the best player in the world and the 64th best player in the world is so slim. Often it's probably under a shot. Yet it's only over 18 holes, and that's the difference. You expand that, all of a sudden the difference becomes more noticeable. So for a Victor Perez, that one moment at the Players Championship, that confidence, I believe, spurred him on to believe that he really can compete over here.
Yeah, that's such a great call. I'd actually forgotten that, Rick, but that chip in was on Saturday morning because with the time hadn't changed yet.
That's
the
right.
field was so big. He didn't get done. He went out there in the gloaming on Saturday morning and knocked a chip in to make the cut. I'm like, talk about emphatic. And that's the kind of thing. You bring up such a good point where it's like, I can do this. I'm the one-shot guy. And there were plenty of scenarios this week because we had him in some coverage where he delivered on that one shot. And, oftentimes it's just that one shot that can be the difference between success and failure. And he looks like he's well on his way.
Here are the updated official World Golf rankings come Monday morning, KP. Matt Kuchar is going to go to 43rd in the world. Victor Perez is going to move from 33 to 30. Scottie Scheffler is going to go to 22. And Billy Horschel is going to be the 17th ranked player in the world. The top 16 all go unchanged.
Yeah, the Perez thing, it feels a little Alex Noren-y to me. To where it's like, yeah, good player, like could be on a Ryder Cup team, but does thriving on the European Tour translate on the PGA Tour? Usually, it doesn't, just because it's more akin to the Korn Ferry Tour, the European Tour is in terms of talent, and so. I think that Perez, I hope he's on the Ryder Cup team because I think he's a ton of fun to watch. And I think he would be, plus the European team always has to have somebody named Victor who's kind of mysterious and like, you don't really know what's going on. So that'll be great. Horschel, I mean, look, I was talking about this with my editor. He's in a position, you said he's 17th now?
Correct.
He's in a position where you got to take advantage of some of these major championships. And he hasn't. He's got one top 15 finish, I think is what I saw. He finished T4 at Marion in, what was that, 13 when Justin Rose won. And that's it. He hasn't made any noise at the majors. And now it's right in front of him. Ryder Cup year, coming off match play. You have to do something, not even win, but just make some noise at a major championship. I think that for me is what's going to be interesting about the rest of his season.
One top 10 in 28 major championships for Billy Horschel. So that is what KP is referencing. I thought I had another stat to cap this off, but I don't think I do. So here's what we're going to do. We got to talk about Corale's Puntacana Resort and Club Championship and do a quick look ahead to the Texas Open, which, if you're paying attention, that's one more stop away from Augusta National. But first, we're going to take a quick break and hear a word from our partners. And we're back. Opening day for the Major League Baseball season is this Thursday, April 1st. That's no April Fools. That's true. If you need any last minute fantasy baseball prep, make sure to listen to the Fantasy Baseball Today in 5 with Frank Stampfel, Scott White, and Chris Towers. It's the best way to stay up to date on the biggest news items in fantasy baseball in 5 minutes or less. Download and follow anywhere you listen to this podcast. Greg, one of our favorite events just occurred. Corrales Puntacana Resort and Club Championship. And at the end of the day, Joel Dahmen comes out on top. This was kind of out of nowhere. Dahmen had not played particularly well leading into this event. He described himself as inspired this week. He goes out, he shoots 2 under par on Sunday, enough for a one-shot victory over both Sam Ryder and Rafael Campos.
It's a big deal. There's no Masters invite, as we said. And by the way, it wouldn't be a First Cut podcast if we didn't get the full Corales Punta Cana Resort and Club Championship name in there. So nice. Now we got it in there twice. I think we're good on that. Yeah, so for Joel Dahmen, it's a big deal. Not Masters, he doesn't get into Masters because of it, but he does get the 2-year exemption, which is really nice, and he gains a little bit of confidence. I mean, this is still a pretty strong field. You got I mean, at least a strong leaderboard coming down the stretch. They're not the best players in the world as those guys are at the match play, but you still have a Danny Willett who's a major champion. You got Graham McDowell who's a major champion up there contending on Sunday in the mix. And there were Sam Ryder just had a great run at the Honda Classic as well. So you have some strong players in there, and it's a big deal to be able to pull that off. I didn't see a whole bunch of this event, but I did see a little bit today, and those greens looked like they were firm. The wind was blowing. It didn't look easy. And getting through the famed Devil's Elbow to get a victory is a big deal.
Devil's Elbow. That's the one I always forget when we do the stretches of holes. I always forget that one. Mark, it's not only the 2-year exemption, but also Joel Dahmen's first win. I feel like a lot of, he's one of these with Max Homer, one of the more popular guys on social. We know the bucket hat. We know all this stuff. It was kind of hard to be like, oh yeah, that's right. That was his first PGA Tour victory. I'm surprised he hasn't won yet.
Yeah, and you know what? I like Greg didn't watch very much of it. I was glued to the pillow fight. It was the final on the World Golf Championships match play. But I caught enough of it to see that this was really hard conditions. And here's a guy who played the back 9, 2 over par, and just held on to win by 1. And I got to thinking about this because when it's a bit of a birdie barrage all over the show, you sort of get singular about what you're doing, and you're playing offense, and you're hitting shots, and you're in contention, and you're trying to take the upper hand. But when conditions are difficult and par is golden and every 4-footer you over with those howling winds is difficult because you're getting buffeted around the place, that is just difficult. And for a person that hasn't won, that must have been so hard, and he has got to be so exhausted right now, but exhilarated. And I'm just jacked for a guy that's sort of beaten the odds a little bit. He's overcome cancer, and there's been a bunch of stuff in his career that he's had to deal with. And he's always had a pretty good attitude about it. And also the thing about Joel Dahmen, he's not afraid to make some pretty controversial remarks. And so, to back it up now and be a PGA Tour winner, even though it's at the alternate event, I think is a really cool deal for him. And kudos to him. He went out and earned it in difficult conditions.
Joel Dahmen had to dodge one last bullet, KP, from Rafael Campos on the 72nd hole. He hits a beautiful putt. He's got the fist pump cocked and ready to go, and it just slips out. That was like the most devastating missed putt I've seen in a long time.
It was that 10-minute stretch of not even 10 minutes, probably like 3 minutes, where they're trading putts. And I mean, that was far more exciting than anything that happened at the match play.
Yes.
And we saw this with, when Hovland beat Josh Teeter last year at the opposite field. Puerto Rico. Was it Puerto Rico?
Yep. The curse.
Yeah.
Come on. It's the curse.
Yeah.
Sorry. I'm out of my world here. It was during Mexico. And I remember Mexico was kind of boring. So everybody was flipping over to Puerto Rico. And you see Josh Teeter just in tears afterwards. And that was sort of how Campos was as well. And it was a reminder of like, yeah, most of the guys out there are not playing for $1.8 million in a heads-up match on a Sunday, right? Most of the guys are Rafael Campos or Joel Dahmen and just trying to grind out, get into the next week, And so that was I'm a sucker for stuff like that. I love stuff like that. And then Dahmen capping it off with, hey, the tab's open. I'll be home next week at his country club
At Mesa.
It was good. That was the event of the weekend. I mean, that was much better than Sunday in Austin.
It definitely won Sunday. The elation from Joel Dahmen and the despair from Rafael Campos was unbelievable viewing television. We've got one more stop before we get to Augusta National. It's the Valero Texas Open, gentlemen. And Greg, I'm looking through this list, and I still see Scottie Scheffler in the field. We'll see about that one. I see Tony Finau in the field, and Dustin Johnson essentially hate registered for this event at the last minute after he got dropped from the group phase in Austin this week.
Yeah, I'd be watching out for DJ, not just because he's number one player in the world, but he seems to be, I mean, watching him at the match play, he seemed to be really into it. Like he really I feel like there was a strong care there. And it's not that he doesn't care sometimes, but there's this level of intensity that I saw with him around Masters time last year. So I expect him to put up a really good performance. I think he's focused and driven, and I think he wants to win the Masters for the second time in a row, and I think he really thinks he can. So this is a big week for him. But the guy that I really have my eye on this week, kind of a sneaky pick who I think is ready to walk through the door and win, is Adam Hadwin. And Adam Hadwin has made,
that is sneaky. We agree. Sneaky, very sneaky.
Yeah.
Deep. We're getting this is Sunday's show, not Monday's show.
Yeah, I know.
Greg.
I just look. I'm looking out for Adam Hadwin as we go here, so you can mark it down now. He came in tied 29th at the Players, tied 8th at the Honda. And he's working with Mark Blackburn, and they are making some real strides. I've seen some on social, some of the videos coming along, and it's much improved. So he's one of those guys where his stats don't really match what I think his performance is right now. So I'm looking for him to break through and get a win.
Hey, if we don't get DJ and Kevin Na paired in the first 2 rounds, then what are we doing here? Why are we even here?
Kevin Na infamously made, what was it, an 11 here? Was it an
16,
11 or 13?
I think.
16.
I think it was a
my
16.
On the 9th hole. Right.
Keeps changing every time I think about it. I think every Sunday we should just be like, here's the guy who's going to win, random guy that we can clip if it ever happens. Like, I'll be like, Brendan Steele, Valero Texas Open. He's got it in the bag. Mark, this one's for you. You're a golf historian here. This event dates back to 1922. That's 99 years. Bob McDonald won the Texas Open in 1922. Do you want to take a guess at what the first place paycheck was that week?
What year was that?
1922.
Remember?
$33.
Wow. No, golf was in a lot better shape then than you are.
$100.
$1,633. The whole purse was
it's the roaring
5,000.
20s. It's the roaring 20s. Things were booming.
Things
We're back.
The whole purse was $5,000, but yeah, that's always fun. Mark, this being kind of the final tune-up before we get to Augusta National, you always wonder how guys treat this event, right? Is it an opportunity to get a tune-up, to get into shape? Are they thinking 1 week ahead? Is it a look-ahead game, or are they kind of living in the moment? Like, what are we dealing with this week?
The TPC San Antonio, there are 2 golf courses there. I think they play the Oaks course is the one. It's nothing like Augusta National. You know, Houston, years past, they'd set the place up same way. They'd have the shade, the roll-offs around the greens, and they'd mow the grain in the fairways back to the players. So you got a feel for it, and the greens were similar with green speeds and such. This place weaves in and out of cacti. There's rocks all over the show. If you miss a fairway in spots, you could break golf clubs. It's that severe. And so I don't think this is a tune-up for Augusta National whatsoever. But for Dustin Johnson, perhaps, you know, it appeared to me in some feature groups coverage, he was still just trying to get a complete bead on where the golf swing was. So maybe this is just more practice under pressure. And I say practice respectfully, because I'm sure if he wins the Texas Open, it's going to be a really cool deal for him. And because it's an illustrious event. No, all jokes aside, I mean, you look at the honor roll here. I used to call this event a bunch, and San Antonio's a great place. Hogan, Nelson, it's Glitterati that have won this tournament. And so it's no real tune-up, I think, for DJ. It's more just, you know, practice under pressure. And you talk about, you know, hot takes maybe, or looking ahead. I have a sense that Jordan Spieth here in Texas is going to now finally do it. I really do. I hate that it would be 1 week early for Kyle Porter, but the way he's playing, the way he looked last week, he's carrying some serious mojo into this place, and he's played well here before.
What would be the ideal finish, KP, for Jordan Spieth? Like not win, right? Like T6.
T9.
Yeah,
T9.
okay. Something like that would be the ideal finish for him this week.
Hey, we've got, I think we're up to 20. I was counting it, 25 out of 27 rounds. He's gained strokes on approach shots.
Did you count this week too? Because I think he did it every round this week.
He did it every round, and he didn't putt, which is just, I mean, ideal for going into Augusta. It couldn't be. We couldn't be
coming together.
If Bryson doesn't win by 5, we could not be like the trajectory could not be better for Spieth right now.
Bryson,
I hate that this is working
well at all, boss. Did you watch any of his golf last week?
So part of my frustration with match play, I think, is the time of the year that it is, because I want takeaways for Augusta, like at this period of time, and I don't feel like I don't know what to take away from this week. You know, like Cantlay
is playing well.
Cantlay gets bounced in the pool play, but he hit the ball like twice as good as anybody else. So what do I do with that? You know, and I feel some frustration over, like, it feels like match play is such a one-off that has very little correlation with what happens at Augusta. So I don't know. I mean, Bryson's going to be fascinating. I don't know. We'll talk about it a ton over the next 2 weeks, I'm sure.
Yeah, but to your point, I hear what you're trying to say, but honestly, you can have a week where you stripe it the entire week and you don't make anything and you still finish 9th or 10th. I mean, I've been involved in stories like that countless times where a guy comes out of the week and he goes, man, I played great and I just didn't get the results. And then some guy sort of cobbles it together. There's a lot. I think there's a lot to take away. It was a real form indicated to me. And I'll tell you what I know for certain from having watched closely. I was calling the thing, is that none of the stars are really playing very well right now. And that's why DJ is playing this week. The only one out of the group of folks that played solidly was Cantlay, and to a certain extent, Jordan Spieth. The rest of them were kind of, not complete at all.
Would you put Rahm in that category too?
Rahm was playing on will to me. There were a lot of plays that were pulled. He missed a lot of balls left. There was a lot of Spanish hands on hips. He looked like a frustrated dude, man. And I'll tell you what, that match against Ryan Palmer, that was pulled off by hook or by crook. That was sheer willpower that he won that thing.
Ryan Palmer just couldn't walk through. He couldn't walk through the door on that. It's like Rahm willed his. I agree with you. He willed his way to win that one.
All right, gentlemen. WGC Dell Technologies match play and the Corale Puntacana Resort and Club Championship in the books. Any final thoughts before we get out of here?
Make Spieth the favorite.
DJ's gonna be like 3-1 when we wake up tomorrow. DJ's gonna be like 3-1. Spieth will be like 9.
I think the week of, I think Spieth will be the third favorite behind DJ and Bryson. I do.
Oh,
I think he's gonna. Yeah. I think he's gonna play well in San Antonio, like Mark said, and then I think he's gonna be like 10-1 to win the Masters, which is an insane thing to think. If you would have clipped this and I could time travel back to January and show it to you guys would be like, he's on drugs.
I feel like we've lost him. We've officially lost him.
So
lost Kyle Porter.
Speaking of being on drugs, so you're telling me he's going to be ranked ahead of John Rahm and Justin Thomas and who you say, Cantlay and DJ, right?
Yeah, I think when it gets to the week of, people will be so excited about wanting to be on Spieth that they'll have to put him at like 9 or 10-1.
That's to Kyle's point. Odds makers don't care who's actually going to win the golf tournament. They just don't want to get burned. And if they start taking a bunch of tickets on Spieth, they're going to have to move him, whether he deserves it or not. So it's kind of, yeah.
There are a couple of guys like Tiger's odds are always way better than well, I shouldn't say always. They're normally better than they deserve to be. Spieth's are normally better than they deserve to be. Rory's are better than they deserve to be most of the time for that exact reason. Just
especially right now.
Right.
Because they're popular guys and guys love to bet on them. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So here's what's going to happen. We'll obviously be back next week for DFS and mega preview and round by round. But for now, Let me thank Greg DuCharme, who you can find on Twitter at @TheRealGFD. Let me thank Mark Immelman, who you can find at Mark_Immelman. Kyle Porter, who you can find at Kyle Porter CBS. Producer Jacob does all the hard work behind the scenes, and you can find me at Rick Run Good. This has been The First Cut, and we'll catch you next time.